This video is about radical equations. A radical equation is an equation where the variable, such as x in this case, is in a square root. In order to solve this equation, we need to get rid of the square root. And in order to get rid of a square root, we could square both sides. But before we can do that, we have to isolate the square root. We can do this by subtracting 3 from both sides of the equation, and then we have 2x on the left hand side and 5 minus 3 or 2 on the right hand side. Now we can square the equation. When we square the equation, we mean that we square both sides of the equation, and when we square the square root of 2x, we just get 2x. If we square 2, we get 4. What we need to do now is solve. In this case, dividing both sides by 2 gives us a solution. Radical equations are equations where you need to check your answer at the end. That is because when we square the equation in this step, we may introduce solutions that are not solutions of the original equation. So what we're going to do is we substitute x is 2 in this equation. After we've done calculating, we check if they're both the same. So the one hand side, 3 plus the square root of 2 times 2, which is equal to 3 plus 2 or 5. The other hand of the equation is just 5, no matter which x you substitute, and these are indeed the same, so our solution is valid. Let's look at another example. Again, we first isolate the square root by subtracting 3 on both sides, so we get the square root of 2x is -1. We square both sides, we get 2x on this hand and 1 on this hand, because the square of a -1 is a +1. We solve this equation further by dividing by 2 on both sides, and we obtain x is a half. Again, we check our answer. The left hand side becomes 3 plus the square root of 2 times a half, which is equal to 3 plus the square root of 1. Square root of 1 is just simply 1, so this is equal to 4. The other hand is, regardless of whatever x we substitute, just 2. We can see that this and this is not the same, so our answer is not valid. The reason this happened is because the square root is always positive, so 3 plus something positive is always larger or equal to 3. But the other hand of the equation, 2, is strictly smaller than 3. So there's no way we can find any value for x for which this part and this part is the same. And you can see that when we subtract the 3 in this step, this side becomes positive, this side becomes negative. So what happens is that we squared both sides, and because of that, both sides become positive. 2x is positive because if it were negative, you couldn't take the square root. And -1 squared becomes a +1. So in this case, both sides are positive and we can solve it. So by doing this step, we introduced a solution which did not exist for the original equation. So our solution is not valid. Since we have no other solutions, we can say that there are no solutions. So remember, for a radical equation, You first isolate the square root, you square both sides, then you solve the equation, and lastly you check if your solution is actually valid.